I'd like to thank you all for being here, the judges especially, the opponent team, and my partner for his fantastic work. We today believe that the embargo is a pointless idea. Not only pointless, but it hurts the Cuban people, and it supports suppression. And we want to lift this because we want to give the Cuban people the justice they deserve, and we want to follow a path of righteousness. And so I'll get to that more in my speech. I will start with significance, harms, inherency, solvency, respectively. So, Roman numeral number 1, significance. 1. The negative team granted the point. 2. By granting the points, the negative team agreed that the embargo is supporting oppression, and the Cuban people are being oppressed because of this idea. 3. This is automatically flows affirmative because it has been granted. So, I'll move on to Roman numeral number 2, harms. A. 1. Negative claim that human rights are improving and because the EU is intervening. 2. In the piece of evidence, there are only negotiations to talk about this, so this is not something already happening. 3. Cuban people not having liberty is still a very big issue. And I will read another piece of evidence supporting my argument. Cuban embargo policies violate basic human rights. Amnesty International, United Nations officials, the U.S. embargo against Cuba, May 7, 2009. The UN Secretary General documented the negative impact of the U.S. embargo on Cuba. In her last report, Human Rights in Cuba described the effect of the embargo on the economic, social, and cultural rights of the Cuban people as disastrous. The fact that the United States is the major regional economic power and the main source of new medicines and technologies means that Cuba is subject to deprivations that impinge on its citizens' human rights. What this piece of evidence is saying, dear judges, is that the human rights are being violated by this embargo because the Cuban people do not have access to some very basic necessities that every country should have access to survive. Moving on to Roman numeral number 2, harms. B. The negative claim that Cuba's economy is good. 2. The negatives do not refute the original argument, saying there's a lack of agricultural resources that is much needed for food shortages and natural disasters. 3. By not refuting the argument, the negative team automatically dropped this point, claiming that Cuba's economy is good is not a valid point in this harm. 4. This automatically flows affirmative because it has not been responded to correctly. Moving on to C. 1. Negative team claimed that the resources are not wasted and they are still there, but 2. They present no evidence supporting their argument. 3. Although I love these guys and they are my friends, they are not really qualified to make statements like these. And 4. The resources are good in Cuba. We do not say they're not good, but we have to extract them and use them. And there's a harm because these ecological resources are priceless and they are being wasted right now. Moving on to Roman numeral number 3, inherency. A, it was granted by a negative team. 2, meaning that we have an inherent barrier, which is the majority of Republicans do not want to grant the plan. But when the judges will vote for us, which they will do, we will have fiat power over the United States government. Moving on to Roman numeral number 5, solvency. A. The negative claim that human rights are improving and Cubans are not suffering anymore. And I would like to say that first off, there are ongoing harms on solvency because they do not show us how lifting the embargo will not alleviate suffering. They are showing us how human rights are already improving. And so this is not an argument on solvency. 2, even though this is true, I would like to say that lifting the embargo and not the isolation of an embargo can promote democracy in Cuba. Juan Magan, Mexican ambassador of Procon.org, nonprofit organization, should the United States maintain its embargo against Cuba, June 25, 2013. Former Illinois Governor George Ryan said, "I think we ought to treat Cuba like we do any other country in the world. Our biggest commodity is democracy, and we ought to be spreading that in any place we can. And what made this country great is free trade. And an influx of U.S. tourists and businesses would expose the sheltered island to our culture and freedoms, and weaken the Castro's regime control over information coming into the country. Trading with China led to economic reforms that brought 100 million people above the poverty line and improved access to healthcare and education across the country." This piece of evidence not only says that it will put Cuba in democracy, but also gives an analogy, an example in the history when by free trade with China, it brought 100 million people over the poverty line. Meaning that after doing our plan, it will bring Cuba over the poverty line and push for a peaceful transition to democracy. Moving on to Roman numeral 5, B. The negative claim that lifting the embargo will I didn't get the argument, but basically it says that the environment was destroyed and it will not increase something. Well, they say that 1, they did not refute the points because they did not say that we don't have agricultural resources. Instead, they are arguing environments being destroyed. 2, that is not a valid point because we are not arguing the environment, we are arguing the agricultural gains that the United States and Cuba can benefit from after the embargo is lifted. And I'd like to read another piece of evidence saying that the embargo harms the people of Cuba and not the government as intended. Juan Gon, Mexican ambassador, Profile.org, nonprofit organization. Should the U.S. maintain this embargo against Cuba, June 25, 2013? Cubans are denied access to technology, medicine, affordable food, and other goods that could be available to them if the United States lifted the embargo. This is a very short piece of evidence clearly stating that by lifting the embargo, Cubans will have access to technology, medicine, affordable food, and other goods that they have to have in order to survive and prosper in today's society. And C was granted by the negative team, and meaning that they agree with this point, so it automatically flows affirmative. So in conclusion, judges, will you vote for the affirmative team and do the same thing here so that we cannot support suppression anymore? Or will we vote for the negative team and cause disastrous effects on the Cuban populations and the U.S. economy? I think the right choice here is the affirmative team, and so please vote affirmative. Thank you.